Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another video. Here we are going to make an Apex trigger on the contact object where if we make a new contact, the contact mailing city will automatically be set to Sydney. So first things first, let's go to the developer console and make an Apex trigger here. Maximize this. So here we're going to make a trigger called contact mailing city Sydney. So file, new, Apex trigger, name, and we are going to make the S object, or the standard object, we're going to make it contact. Here. Okay, so here we created this trigger. So in this trigger, even though it says this when we make it, like before insert, it actually is going to be before an insert in this case, because this trigger is acting on the same object that fires the trigger. So if, for example, the trigger fired due to like a record change on account, and as a result, it would create something on the contact object, which is a different object, then this would be after insert in this case. But since it fires because of the contact object and it's then acting also on the contact object, it's going to be before. So in its insert, because what we are doing is going to happen as we are inserting a contact record, as opposed to update for if we were updating a record. So as best practice, we're going to add these things here. And here. Just showing which these two things are here. Okay, so we're going to put logic, but instead of putting the trigger logic in the trigger, we're actually going to make a new class that's aside from this trigger class here, that's going to contain or handle the logic. So this is basically to implement the trigger framework, which means that by putting the logic in a separate class and then calling that class from this trigger class, it's going to allow us to keep things more organized. We can reuse the handlers across many triggers. It makes it easier to write tests for the trigger logic. It's also a better place to handle errors instead of handling them in the trigger. And if many people are working on the code, this separate handler class that we're going to make is going to allow us all to work on the code without anyone having to touch the Apex trigger class. So we will make the class called contact insert trigger handler with a method called trigger handler. But before we do this, let's call the class and the method that we haven't created yet so I can explain something. So, and here's the syntax to call the class and the method, or the method from a class that we haven't made yet. So basically, this is going to be the name of the class that we're going to make, and this is going to be the name of the method within that class. I'm going to explain what trigger.new means as well. Okay. So trigger.new is going to return the new list of records in which we want, because this trigger is happening when we insert a new contact. So trigger.old, on the other hand, would give us an old list of records, and by this I mean it would return records before they were updated, but we're basically going to pass the new records from trigger.new to this new method that we're going to create. And I'll go a little more in depth, so don't worry. So I have this website here also. I think this is helpful. Basically tells you if you can include trigger.new or trigger.old in conditions like before insert or after insert. So yes, you can use trigger.new in before insert. So I'm going to put the link to this in the description. Also, I'm going to be posting the code to these two classes on GitHub, and the link will be in the description. So now let's actually make the new class called contact insert trigger handler. We'll do file. Actually, we can just copy this here. new Apex class. Here's the name. Here is our new class. So we're going to, right off the bat, we're going to add this code here, public static, and I'll explain what these mean. This is going to be the name of the method. And we're going to put a list in here, and I'll explain what this is for it also. So public means that this method can be accessed by other classes, like this, for example. Static means that when we're calling the method, we're calling this method here from the trigger class, which is this. So here we're calling the method. When we're doing so, you can only, like, all you have to do is this syntax here: contact insert trigger handler, the class name dot the method name, as opposed to having to make an instance of the trigger handler class, which you would have to do something like this. So because we have static, we're able to do just this, as opposed to making an instance of this trigger handler class. Like this, the name of the class, and then handler equals new, and then also the name of the class again. So we don't have to do that if it's static, and then we would have to do this too. But since it is static, we don't. So let's go back here, and basically void is the return type, and it just means that since we're not trying to return a value, this method is just going to basically do like some operations or actions and not produce a value that's like that has to be returned. So if we wanted to return like a string, then we would put string as the return type instead of void. So basically we are putting this is the name of the method, trigger handler, and we're putting a contact list in here called contacts, because this gives the method here the ability to hold a list of contacts that can be iterated through. And remember, so we got the list of new contact records from trigger.new that was passed to us from this trigger class. So we're passing this trigger.new into this method from this class. So, and this is the method from this class. So we're going to receive trigger.new in here, and it's going to be stored in this contacts list. And we're going to add a for loop to iterate through this list, and I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, so this loop right here, this for loop, is basically saying that for each contact that will then be stored in this variable. So we have this list of new contacts from trigger.new. It's going to be here, and then it's put in this con variable here. So for each contact that will be stored in this variable, we will set the mailing city equal to Sydney. And then we're going to make something appear in the system.debug that I will show you. And here, I'm just going to cancel this one and just add another one here. Control A and then Shift Tab. To make it more organized. All right, and then I'm going to remove this space here. And now this is looking good. Save them. And now let's go to the org and make sure that this works. So here we are in contacts. Let's make a new contact. put phone number, click save. And if we go to details, let's see. Yes, perfect. So the mailing address. So if we click this edit here, we'll see that the mailing city, as promised, has Sydney in it. And let's go to the system.debug to make sure that this is there. So here we are. We're going to click logs, and we're going to click the most recent one, which is here, and click on red. And if we click debug only, because system.debug, this message is going to show up in the debug only. It's going to show up in the debug line, but here we're just going to filter this by debug only, and we'll see that contact mailing city has been updated to Sydney, just as we had in the message here. So that means that this first it inserted this field, and then it also put this in the system.debug. So that's awesome. That is great and working. So again, I'll put this GitHub project link in the description so you can have access to the code, and we will see you in the next one.